Welcome back to On the Workbench. This is part 4 of my 2020 Toolbox Tour series. If you missed the previous parts, I'll put a playlist in the description below and a card in the upper right corner to go back to the previous video. Let's jump right in to part 4, which picks up where part 3 leaves off. Okay, so now I've teased you long enough. Let's go to the big drawer, if you will, the money drawer, where all the excitement happens. And so up here is the big drawer. So let's go through just some generalities before we go into too much detail. So let's see, a couple things here at the front. I've got some long pry bars, and I also have my serpentine belt removal tool in here with my pry bars. They don't really fit in the other places. So I've got those. So then in the back, I've got, starting here on the left side, my 1/2-inch metric. Those are all 12-point. Almost all of these are made in America Craftsman, with a few exceptions that I'll point out. And most of these are all 6-point. In general, I try to avoid 12-point sockets. I personally am a big fan of the 6-point socket. I find very little advantage to a 12-point socket, because if you need a 12-point socket for clearance, just use a finer tooth ratchet. It's very simple. I know some of you guys may disagree with me on that, but that's just kind of my viewpoint on that. And so I've got these 1/2-inch sockets here in metric and standard. And all these sockets are on these older cobalt magnetic rails. Cobalt used to be the only place I could find these, but I've seen these now pop up from a variety of manufacturers under various branding. Ulsa Tools is one I've seen online that looks very similar to this. All these were bought as cobalt, but I don't think that really matters. And so I can just grab any rail of these and take these out of the toolbox to the job. Let's see, so what else? So we got 3/8 sockets here from 22 down to 6mm. Now finding a 22 is a little bit more difficult sometimes. Then I also have a handful of these wider, they're not officially bit driver sockets. They all have a standard size on them that are intended for making other adjustments on a car. These come in sets. I don't know that these are quite as common as they used to be, but every now and then I see something that those are useful for. And then we've got 3/8 standard. And then I've got a handful of the screwdriver bits. So we've got Phillips and standard. And then moving on, we got 1/4-inch. So I've got a rail here of 1/4-inch standard in shallow impact, shallow, I guess regular shallow, and then deep. And then for metric, impact, regular shallow, and deep chrome. Again, all 6-point. And then now moving over here to the middle, in the back, we got my 1/2-inch sockets. In the back, we got 1/2-inch standard. We've got 3/8. And then over here on the end are my Husky lug nut sockets here. These have that little sleeve on it to prevent, I'm sorry, I guess they're gear wrench, not Husky, to prevent damage to aluminum wheels or alloy wheels. Then I've got 3/8 deep impacts, standard and metric. And then I've got standard 1/2-inch deep, as well as 1/2-inch spark plug sockets. And then I've got 1/2-inch deep metric. Now some of these, unfortunately, are 12-point. For some reason, some of the deep Craftsman ones in Made in America, I could only get in 12-point. On the end over here is my extra deep SK spark plug socket. That's been a real lifesaver for me. Got a few others of these swivel spark plugs. There we go. Where the swivel is built into the socket. This one is a 5/8. Again, it just gives me more options for trying to pull a spark plug by having the swivel built into the socket to maintain length. And then in front here are the universal ones. These are the deep. I've contemplated adding these in either shallow or 1/4-inch or 1/2-inch. So far I only have these in the 3/8 deep. And those have served me well enough when I need to pull out the spline drive. Because I think in a number of jobs that I've done, it's always useful to have more options of the 3/8 size. I think the 3/8 is that sweet spot. And so having between the 3/8 spline, the 3/8 deep, the 3/8 shallow, And what I'd like to add is a set of 3/8 semi-deeps. I haven't done that yet. That's probably my next purchase to add to my set. And then moving forward here, I've got, these drop right into a ratcheting wrench. It turns a ratcheting wrench into a low profile socket and wrench. You can see there's a little ball detent there on it. I made this tray myself here to hold these. I don't even know if you can still buy these anymore. These are Craftsman, made in USA set here. I guess there's a little bit of... and so these work well. They're all 12 point, unfortunately, but you can see laser engraved on the end there is the size. Here's the 10 millimeter. So just all you gotta do is find the wrench with the exact same size as this, pop it in, and you're good. So again, kind of an oddball, but very useful for tight situations. Moving over to the right side here. On the right side, we've got more of the specialty sockets. And so then let's see, in the back here is my 1-inch drive, extremely shallow Astro pneumatic nano socket for K&N oil filters that have the 6.1-inch drive on it. And then I've got my impact driver that you hit with the hammer to be able to help remove parts on brakes. I've got a handful of other little specialty, like these are the oil filter sockets. These are all snap-on, 32, very shallow, 6-point. Let's see what else is on here. A few other specialty snap-on sockets here for removing antenna nuts. I guess there's a bug in there. A 10 millimeter semi-deep. I've got a specialty plug socket here. That's 3/8 for removing a drain plug on a rear differential. And then here's a little blue point one here for turning radiator drains or drain cocks, petcock valves. Of course, the claw for removing oil filters, oil filter cups. This is another one that's part of the Snap-on oil filter set. This is a flip socket for some reason. I don't know why they couldn't make these into two separate sockets and why they kept that as a flip for the, see, what are these two? 36 and 24. I would much have preferred the Snap-on would have put those into two separate sockets rather than combining them together. Okay, so now on the back, my more torque set. Those are from Lyle. They came in this little holder here. I just kind of left them like that. And then I've got my tap sockets. I think those are also from Lyle. Tap sockets are amazing. I just hope you don't actually need to use them because whenever you need to break out the tap sockets, it usually means it's not a good day. But I think they're much more useful than the usual tap wrenches that you find in your tap kits. That then this opens up the wide array of ratchets, extensions, and everything else to be able to properly tap and thread a hole. Okay, so moving forward, I've got in a variety of sizes here. These are only metric here, so let's see, this is the 5 millimeter flex sockets. So again, these provides a, they're a little more compact than taking a socket and sticking an adapter behind it to get in and out of tight spaces. Now some of these are held together here with a roll pin rather than the regular pin. Most of these are USA and 6 points. Those are wonderful options to have. And then my next rack here are my socket adapters. So I've got my flex adapters, and then I've got my increasers or reducers. And then I also have a handful of bit holders. So here's one that actually will hold a 5/16 bit. Again, these are chrome. I don't want to use this with an impact, but I can just go ahead and drop in one of the 5/16 bits I would use with my impact. And then put that with a socket 1/4-inch holder. And then, so that's a 3/8 drive, and I've got the 1/4-inch also in a 1/4-inch drive. Useful to have both sizes of those. Other end over here is a lighted socket extension. Definitely a bizarre addition. Let me just take this socket here and show you how this works. What you take is you take the back of what would be the ratchet. I'm just going to use this flex adapter here and plug this in the back. And then that should engage the light. There we go, and there's the light. So it provides a little bit of a light into a socket if you're trying to go into a deep recess. The only problem with this is pretty good size and diameter. And so if it's a tight space that is confined, this might not be an option for you, but this is just another option I keep available in my box to make sure I've got the right tool to do the job every time. Okay, moving on. The next set of sockets here, these are the Snap-on FDX sockets. I found these to be mildly useful. At the very least, they're useful for having a second set of metric 3/8 sockets in the box. Because like I mentioned before, the 3/8 to me is that sweet spot that is what gets most of the use in terms of my tools. And so having multiple sets of 3/8 I think is useful. And the geometry in these is just a little bit different. I can't say I've honestly found any advantage to having those other than just having it as an extra set of 3/8 sockets. So then over here on the side, a couple other oddball ones. I've got a 10mm 12-point socket, because you can never have too many 10mm sockets in your box, right? Over here, Master Cool high pressure refrigerant socket. Definitely an oddball one. I wish this one was actually labeled and said something like that on it. And then I've got a couple. So then here's a Toyota spare tire removal tool with a penta socket on it. So it actually has a built-in extension on it. Kind of weird. Then I've got a couple other penta sockets in 3/8 and a 1/2 inch because they fit the water cover out front, that if I need to actually access that, I can get to it to shut off water to my house in an emergency. And then coming over, I've got Impact E-Torx, Impact Torx, Impact Hex Standard, Impact Hex Metric, 3/8 Impact, Impact Swivels, 1/2 inch to 3/8 Impact Reducer, 3/8 to 1/2 inch Impact Increaser. And then we've got the 1/2 inch ones here towards the rear. And then coming over here, here's a Milwaukee 1/2 inch Impact to 1/4 inch bit holder. And then on the end here is the 1/2 inch to 5/16 bit holder for my hand impact tool. And then we got the rest of the 1/2 inch impact sockets there. So that takes me through the box, but I've got more tools that don't fit in the box like many of you. So a couple other tools that I almost forgot. I've got my post level here and some of these bungee cables here for hanging brake calipers when doing brake jobs. Kind of tucked out of the way. Thank you for watching part 4. This series continues with part 5, which is the final part of this series. The full playlist is below, and I'll put a card up in the upper right-hand corner so you can continue watching part 5. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in part 5.